Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatly Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now I'm going to try something a little bit different in today's video. Now if you've been watching the channel a while, you may have picked up that I'm not a big Beatles bootleg guy. I don't have stacks of them, but I do have a few, and some of them are really good. And I wanted to talk about two Beatles bootleg box sets that I've got, namely this one, the Beatles Mythology Volume 2, which covers the period 1964 to 1966. It's a 4 CD package, and its companion, the Beatles Mythology Volume 3, which covers the period 1966 to 69, which is also a 4 CD package. There is a Volume 1 which covers 62 to 64, which I don't have. That is a 3 CD package, and these box sets are really good. I'll tell you how I came across them. I actually bought them when they first came out in 1999. I used to work with a bloke, and he knew a bloke who knew a bloke who knew a bloke who could get bootlegs, and my mate, he was very excited about these. He said, "You've got to get these, Tone. You know, they're what the anthology could have been." And I'm not sure if that is an accurate description, but these box sets, they do certainly go very deep into these periods, with a combination of interviews that were taken at the time with various Beatles, and of course studio outtakes and sessions and that sort of stuff. And you know, a lot of people not interested in interviews, but I always think that they're interesting because they're interviews of what the Beatles thought at the time, and because we now know the story and how it evolved, it's interesting to look at these interviews and see, you know, whether what they were talking about there actually materialized and that sort of thing. So it's a combination of both. Volume 2 is more interview heavy and Volume 3 is more musical heavy, but the Volume 2 is there's got lots of music on it as well. And I thought what we'd do is a kind of deep dive into these box sets, and I'll kind of tell you exactly what is on these box sets, because if you're after them, if you fancy getting them, you know, it's good to be armed with the information, because always when you buy bootlegs, you're having a little bit of a punt. You never know really what you're getting until you get it home and play it. So if you are after these, you know, if you are after watching these videos, if you fancy getting them, you know, you're at least you're armed with the information. Now these are quite hard to get now. I did have a little sniff around on the internet, and you know, I saw an example of each of these being offered on eBay, and the person selling wanted 300 odd quid for them, so they're quite expensive to buy and quite rare to find. But you know, if you are after these, you know, you probably find them somewhere in the world a lot cheaper than that. So what I'm thinking is, so I'm thinking a kind of a deep dive. I'll tell you about every track that's on each of the discs, and there is a lot of stuff. Each disc on both sets is over 70 minutes, so they're absolutely chock-a-block full of Beatley goodness. Now I can't possibly do that sufficiently in one video, so I'm thinking that this is going to be a mini series, and maybe we'll cover one CD in each episode. I think we'll call the series the Bootleg series, because that's a really good name for a series about bootlegs, and it's never been used before, apart from obviously when Bob Dylan did his bootleg series, which is still going on. I'll tell you something funny about Bob Dylan. Mrs. Beatly Tone absolutely hates Bob Dylan. I love Bob Dylan, but whenever one of his songs comes on, when we're streaming or whatever we're doing, or playing records or whatever, she hates it. She hates it. And the funny thing is that Bob Dylan knows that Mrs. Beatly Tone hates him, so he comes around the house and he hides in different places and jumps out and scares her. The other day she opened the fridge and Bob Dylan was inside. Guitar, harmonica, the whole lot. How does it feel to be on your own, like a rolling stone? She did not like it, not one little bit. She didn't like it one little bit. She liked it even less when he dropped his harmonica in the butter. But enough of that absolute drivel and nonsense. Let's get on with it. So volume 2 looks like that. The track listing is on the back, and I'll just run that by you very quickly. You can pause it if you want to look at and see what is on this box set, but there's no need because we're going to go through each individual one. I'll quickly show you volume 3 as well, but we're not going to talk about that in today's video. So there you go, that is the content. So when you open the box up, the CDs are stacked inside there. So you've got disc 1, which is the one we're going to talk about today, disc 2, disc 3, and disc 4. And you also get a booklet in it, which is not of that much value. This booklet is kind of it's a list of John Barrett's studio notes about each of the tracks. John Barrett was an engineer at Abbey Road, and it kind of gives you the information about recording dates and which mixes and that sort of thing. It's not really an interesting read, if I'm honest. So let's get on with it. We're going to look at disc 1 of volume 2 first of all. That's what we're going to do in today's video. When you open it up, it looks like that. There is the disc sitting there. You do get a little booklet in it, which is not that informative, but it tells you about each track that is on the disc. A little bit of information. But when you say it's an anthology alternative, it's nothing like the detail that of Mark Lewison's notes on the anthology. Okay, so I'm now going to go through each of the tracks on the CD and tell you what's there. So this is the track listing for CD 1. I hope you can read that okay. The track 1 is an interview with Paul on A Touch of Frost. So that's an interview with David Frost. It took place on the 15th of April 1964, so around the time that Hard Day's Night had come out. And David Frost asks him, what is next for the Beatles, and Paul doesn't really know, but he talks about how their popularity has grown and how they consider their career in kind of stages. So he kind of says, the first thing we wanted was a recording contract, we got that. Then we wanted a #1 single, and they got that. And then they wanted to go to America, and they've done that. And now they want to make a film, and that kind of leads into talking a little bit about the Hard Day's Night movie. David Frost asked him a good question about songwriting with John, what he considers to be a good song, and would he consider, when he asked him what he considers a good song, Paul says, well, if me and John like it, then we think it's a good song. So David Frost asked him, well, what if you like it, but when it goes out, nobody else likes it? Is it still a good song? And obviously that thing hadn't happened yet, but or ever. And Paul said, well, yeah, if me and John like it, then we still consider it to be a good song. And he then asked him about his thoughts for the future. How long did he think it would last? Paul said, well, hopefully we'll get another couple of years. And David Frost says, well, what would you like to do after that? And he says, well, write songs and then retire. And David Frost said, well, the way things are going, I can't really see you retiring until 20 10, which is interesting. That's what I mean by it's interesting listening to these interviews retrospectively when you know what has happened. So you got that one wrong, David Frost, but good interview. Lasts about 5 minutes and 11 seconds. Track 2 is take 2 and 3 of Hard Day's Night. It was recorded on the 16th of April 1964 at Abbey Road, and it starts off with them getting the opening chord wrong about 3 times. John shouts out, "Oh, that's wrong, I'm still playing this boy," but eventually they go into the main body of the song, and it is great. It is superb, very robust. It's in its early stages, but the Beatles are getting very excited about it. You can hear them whooping and cheering as they're playing along throughout the song. The sound quality is superb. George hasn't worked out his guitar solo yet. The solo that he does play, he messes up. But apart from that, it's a really, really great version, a very exciting version. And this has to be a nailed on inclusion in the Hard Day's Night box set when that eventually arrives. It's a big thumbs up for me. The track clocks in about 3 minutes. So track 3 is a 10-minute interview for German radio with a guy called Dieter Brauer. This interview had never been it's never been broadcast anywhere outside of Germany, so getting it on this box set was hearing it for the first time. To be honest, it's not great. Dieter doesn't know a lot about the Beatles. He forgets George's name halfway through. John isn't present at this interview. It takes place on the 26th of March 1964 at the Hilton Hotel in Park Lane in London. Dieter tries to encourage the Beatles to speak German when they're answering the questions, and Paul and George are fairly comfortable doing that. Paul's German is very good. George's is pretty good as well, but Ringo kind of refuses point blank. He says he forgets the words. He's much more reluctant to speak German, not confident enough to do it. Dieter asked them some silly questions like, what did they eat and drink in Germany? And then he makes a bit of a faux pas. He said, did you spend much money on girls in Germany? Which probably lost in translation a little bit, but then he kind of justifies it by saying, when you took them out, sort of thing. They talk about German girls for a little bit, and he asked them if they ever want to get married. Paul says he's not keen on marriage, but maybe he will in a long time, in the future. George says in German that he's too young, and Ringo says he's not a confirmed bachelor. He wants to get married one day, but I'm having a really good time at the moment, I can assure you. So we won't dwell on that too much. He asked some questions like, do they go on the buses, and do they go on the underground in London, and do they go out in their Beatles suits? Which George sort of treats with a little bit of contempt. He said, yes, and I even have my Beatles head on with my Beatles haircut when I go out. That is pretty much it. It's not a great interview. It doesn't seem as if he's aware too much about Beatles music. He's asked which songs he should play when the interview is broadcast, and Paul says play some songs from the films, and he says, which one? I don't know the songs. And can I play your German language songs, and can you remember the name of them in German? Which, George just rattles off the names of the German songs, no problem whatsoever. Anyway, that's about it. It's 10 minutes, as I say. It's not great. So track 4 is a short 3-minute interview by Fourth Radio, a Scottish radio station, and this takes place before the Beatles' second show at the ABC Cinema in Edinburgh on the 29th of April 1964. The interviewer is Muriel Firmage, and she asks some silly questions like, what do the Beatles think of Scottish audiences? Are they scared of Scottish audiences? To which Paul replies, only when they start throwing things like jelly babies, we're scared. most of the interview, most of the 3 minutes is taken up with the regular version of Can't Buy Me Love, and then at the end, the interviewer asks the Beatles to do some dedications for people who are in hospital at the moment, and they all give a very silly response. Like Ringo says, "Remember, the sooner you're better, the sooner you're home." Fascinating stuff. Now, the thing about this recording is that it went undocumented for a very long time, and therefore the airing that it had on this box set was the first airing that it had for 35 years. But basically, this is pretty dismissible. What isn't dismissible is track 5. Now, this is a really interesting and unusual mix of Hard Day's Night, the title track, from the album. This is the United Artists version, and this is the version that appeared on the 1968 cassette and the 1970 8-track tape cassette. Now, the main difference is that the mix is much brighter than the mix that we're used to, and the bit at the end where I feel all right. Normally we get 3 of those at the end of the song. On this version we get six of them, so it makes it very different. It makes it a very different ending. You're not kind of expecting this elongated ending before George's picky electric 12-string guitar comes in to end the song. So that's a great addition to this box set. So the next track is called Hong Kong Interviews, and these take place in Hong Kong and also in Sydney as well. This is the Beatles on their way to Australia, a stopover at Kai-Tak Airport in Hong Kong, where they're interviewed by Bob Rogers. He asked them several things, like what have they bought in Hong Kong, and Paul talks about bartering, enjoying bartering. They asked Ringo about his rings, and he explains what all his rings are and who they came from, and that sort of thing. They also asked them what they're looking forward to in Australia, and asks whether what do they know about Sydney, and Ringo pipes up, "Well, I don't know much, but I know they've got a bridge there." And then the second part of the interview is actually in Sydney, where they talk about the reception that they got from the fans at the airport, and also talking about schoolgirls carrying out a sit-in because they weren't allowed to listen to the Beatles arriving in Australia on their transistor radio. So they organised a protest at the school where they refused to do any work. As I say, that's a 10-minute piece. That is followed with track 7, which is Seen at 6:30 Interview. This is an interview for Granada TV. That's the independent TV station in the UK, or it was in the 60s, that served the Liverpool and Manchester areas, and they're talking about the premiere of the Hard Day's Night film. This takes place on Ringo's birthday, the 7th of July 1964, and the Beatles saying that they'd seen the film on their own in the cinema and didn't get too excited about it, but when they went to the London premiere, they got very excited about being in the theatre with an audience and hearing their reactions, where they laugh, where they boo, that sort of thing, and said they were looking forward to the Liverpool premiere. Track 8 is called Top Gear Trailers, and this is basically the Beatles recording trailers for a new radio program called Top Gear, not to be confused with the Top Gear program that is about motor cars, and they're deciding on what sort of voice they should be doing it. Paul starts off doing it in a very sort of posh voice, thinking that that's how you announce things that are on the BBC, but he's told by George and John to just do it in his normal Paul McCartney voice. This is a piece that lasts about 2 minutes 38 seconds, and the Beatles are being very, very silly. So finally we start to get some more musical items now on CD1, and track 9 is a recording of If I Fell. The Beatles recorded on 14th of July 1964 for that episode of Top Gear, that first episode of the Top Gear show that they did the trailers for. And it's a superb version, very acoustic, beautiful harmonies by John and Paul, very nice gentle version. On the CD notes it's called a clean version. It was broadcast on the 16th of July 1964, and also on that show was Dusty Springfield and Carl Perkins. So tracks 10 to 14 is the entire live performance that the Beatles did on Blackpool Night Out, which was a TV show that went out live on a Sunday night, the 19th of July 1964, recorded at the ABC Theatre in Blackpool. Now, it was thought that this performance had been completely lost. There was no official tape of this, but a recording of it was discovered in the 90s on a reel-to-reel tape. And it does sound like the person who has recorded it has just done it with a microphone up against the TV speaker, because the sound quality is very tinny. I mean, you can hear everything, but it's just not studio quality. You can hear that it's been probably recorded from the TV. So the sound quality is not great, but the performances are great. They did 5 songs: Hard Day's Night, Things We Said Today, You Can't Do That, If I Fell, and Long Tall Sally. So it's great that that has been rediscovered and preserved, and it's here on this CD. So track 15 is quite interesting. It's George's appearance on the TV show Jukebox Jury. Now, if you're not from the UK, you don't know what Jukebox Jury is. It was basically a BBC panel show. It used to go out on a Saturday afternoon, late Saturday afternoon, a panel show where they would have a panel of celebrities and they would be listening to the records that were being released that week, usually 5 or 6 records, and they would give their opinion on the records and whether they thought it would be a hit or a miss. Now, it's quite annoying because you don't hear the records that George is reviewing, you just hear the clapping from the previous panelists' comments, and then it goes on to George, and then it goes to the clapping for the next song, from the last panelists. So you don't know exactly what he's talking about, but you can gather from George's comments that one of the records is by Kenny Lynch, one of them is by The Foremost, because he said he hopes that was a hit because they are his friends. But really interestingly, one of the records is by The Crystals, and I don't know which one that would be. But George says, now, this is a Phil Spector thing, and I think that Phil Spector has had his day now, which is quite interesting to hear retrospectively now. That was his thoughts on Phil Spector in 1964. Obviously, he thought differently much later. As a little side note, Ringo also recorded his performance on Jukebox Jury on the same day, and that was to be aired on a later show, but that has been lost in the midst of time, so it doesn't appear on this CD. This whole section lasts about 2 minutes 50. Track 16 on this CD is an absolute belter. It's take 11 of What You're Doing from Beatles for Sale, recorded at Abbey Road on the 30th of September 1964. This is an unedited version of the song taken from the master tape, and at the time it was marked as being the best version, although we know now that they did go back and re-record it. Now, this version is very different. I would say this is more rocky than the Beatles for Sale version. Paul's vocals are more throaty, Ringo's drumming is more robust. George's 12-string guitar jingly jangling away in the background beautifully, and you can really hear the vocal harmony work between Paul and John beautifully, really clearly. You can hear exactly what they're doing and how they're harmonizing against each other. Now, it is different. It's a different version. It doesn't have Ringo's drum intro at the beginning of the song. The instrumental break in the middle is different. And when we get to the end of the song, where Paul sings What You're Doing to Me for the Last Time, the song comes to a stop. Not a mistake, that it's purposely comes to a stop. There is a 2-bar gap, and then it comes back in with the instrumental coda that we recognise as being the fade out of the song from Beatles for Sale. Now those 2 bars would eventually be filled again with Ringo's drum fill, you know, that boom, 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 diddle-dum, boom, 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 diddle-dum, bow, 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 bow. So that's how it is, and that is it's a fantastic version of this song, and this has to be included in a Beatles for Sale box set, in the sessions for that box set, if we ever get it. Track 17 is also an outtake from Beatles for Sale. This is take 4 of Mr. Moonlight, recorded on the 14th of August 1964 at Abbey Road. The version that was on Beatles for Sale, that was take 8. Now, this version has got a very different feel to it because it doesn't have any percussion, but more importantly, it doesn't have that Hammond organ on it, which means that the instrumental break in the middle, which is played on Hammond organ, is here played on electric guitar, and I think it's both George and John playing together. Now this brings good and bad news, because the instrumental break played on electric guitar sounds a little bit clunky and it grinds a little bit, I think. The good news is, because there's no Hammond organ in the middle, the song no longer sounds like the background music in a 1970s soft porn movie. Track 18 is an edited version of that take 11 of What You're Doing that we talked about a few minutes ago. Now you may remember in the 1980s, the early 80s, there was talk of an album called Sessions that was going to come out, and it was going to have Beatles outtakes on it, including things like Leave My Kitten Alone. And this is an edit done by John Barrett for that LP. It's 16 seconds shorter than the version that we talked about a few minutes ago, but it's still that take 11. Now obviously that Sessions LP never happened, but it was talked about quite a lot that it was going to happen, but it never materialized. So I suppose having this version of that here has got some value, I suppose. Track 19 is a 1 minute 37 seconds snippet of an interview done by Tyne Tees TV in the Beatles hotel room in Stockton-on-Tees prior to their gig at the Globe Cinema in Newcastle, I think that is. That was on the 15th of October 1964. Now this is totally disposable. The interviewer asked the Beatles their opinions on the forthcoming general election, and George, unsurprisingly, says that he wants to see taxes cut. That's not taxes that you drive, that's taxes that you pay, obviously. And John says he wants more wine. It's totally disposable. The final 2 tracks come from another Top Gear recording session. This took place on the 17th of November 1964, and they do She's a Woman and I Feel Fine. I Feel Fine coming first. Now, I Feel Fine has got studio chat at the beginning and at the end, and they have a couple of goes at getting the feedback at the beginning of the song right, and George also messes up the guitar riff at the beginning. Now you can hear this song on the live on air, the BBC Volume 2 in its entirety, exactly as it is here, but obviously when this came out in 1999, that live on air version wasn't available. Interestingly, the actual song I Feel Fine also appears on the first BBC Live at the BBC album, but different version with no studio chat either side. And also John was allowed to do a second vocal to double track it, so it's like it is on the record. That version appears on the first BBC Live at the BBC album. The final track on this CD is the version of She's a Woman, which also appears on Live at the BBC, but it appears on Live at the BBC without any studio chat at the beginning. Here there is some studio chat, and it lasts for 3 minutes 16. So that is CD 1 of this box set done. My overall opinion of this is that there is too much interview material on this CD and not enough musical material, but I can assure you the other discs in this set are far more music centric, and we'll go into those in a future episode. But please let me know down in the comments what you think of this, and I'd love to hear from you. As you know, I read all your comments and I will respond to all your comments. If you've liked the video, please just take a second of your life to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel and it helps the video get out to more people, helps me grow the channel. If you're seeing this video or this channel for the first time, please consider supporting it by subscribing. I'd really appreciate it and love to have you on board. Okay, that is it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye bye.